Hi, Mako.
Hey, Julia, good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome home.
Thank you. It's good to be home. I was, I guess we were out for like 3 weeks or so, that's longer than usual. So,
Mm. What stands out in your mind?
oh my gosh, just so many things happening, and so many exciting things. We just were told that the exhibit that we have been trying to figure out when it was going to be is actually happening in 2029 in Hiratsuka Museum. Um, they're going to be renovating, so you'll be the first exhibit with a new renovation done. So that's exciting. Uh,
That's so exciting.
yeah, and these people don't may not realize how long preparation for especially like a museum exhibit takes. It's typically 3 to 5 years. So um, even being 4 years ahead, it's not so unusual, but that means you get to do all the prep work and working with their curators. They have a group of really stellar curators there. So he's actually going to see the Taipei exhibit, the Taiwan exhibit, actually in Kaohsiung, south of Taiwan. That's ongoing museum show. So so we have time to prep and get ready in so many ways.
So exciting.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
and that is, it's part of the slow art, right?
Mm.
All this, all this preparation, all this preparatory planning,
Yeah.
um, because it is something that will be seen by hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think, when we look at our art as purely transactional, right? It's just something that you show and you market and you live off of or whatever. Um, you might lose this side of very deliberate relational, creating slowness in the process of preparing for something. And I think that's a good point to raise because depending on how you approach your projects, whether it be your concert or your writing, or you end up thinking about like how much space and time it will require that is appropriate for that project. And it's not just, you know, printing it and marketing it. And so artist life is always waiting, waiting for things to happen. And of course, many rejections, right? That we try many things and for one reason or another, we cannot accomplish what we set out to do. And yet, once in a while you do get a yes, and when that happens, you have to be ready, right? So for this museum exhibit, it's a really large space. So if I hadn't been preparing for this for the last, 10 years, as you know, you helped me with some of the larger pieces. It wouldn't I wouldn't be ready for it. And so waiting, getting ready, whether you have a positive, outcome or not, I think you're always in the mindset of um, trying to do, trying to envision what you want to do and then getting ready for it.
Yeah. And it's so important that you keep doing the work, even if you don't know where it's going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the discipline of, what you and I get to do. It's a privilege, really. We don't necessarily have any guarantee that that can happen. But if we can, then that consistency really leads into work. The set of works that people can look at and say, here's a progression of some kind, here's a series of some kind, and what I think the curators look for when they try to decide on, what are they going to work on, it's partly this consistency over time. And many times artists have not maybe had a show in a long time, but they know that the artist is working. And your consistency in whatever you're doing really, really helps to set the tone.
Mhm. Yeah. And you wrote about that in one of your recent newsletters. I think it was on your Substack,
Yeah.
how the sketching that you are doing, the studio going with you,
Yeah.
the things that you're seeing are always incorporating into it.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because, I always thought that, right? I'm always carrying sketchbooks and, um, but even, I got to visit one of the Japanese art schools. I was invited to lecture on my new book. So I did that and got to tour the studios of graduate students and some of the fourth year students and I was reminded once again of this posture of how we artists are always making, like as soon as you get into the studio, you notice the materials, you notice what the students working on, but you're already like your neural network or whatever comes alive in a sense of us being in our own studios, right? That we're bringing in something very, I think, significant to that experience. And that's why perhaps what we say can be helpful because, we are seeing something and we can respond to it in our own intuitive language. And when we were in Vietnam, of course, I always carry my sketchbook, but I actually, could sit down one afternoon and spend time doing these sketches of these amazing landscapes, seascapes that are in Halong Bay. And, Hedgen was taking photos of me sketching, so that's what I was able to post. But I'm always drawing in my head, I don't know about you, but I'm always observing, and there are ways of getting to the essence of whatever you're looking at, whether it be a landscape or whether it be a bird or flowers in front of you. You are trying to probe into you know whatever the reality is that object is presenting itself. And you want to be aware of the presence of reality, around you. And sketching, like anything else, is a discipline to pay attention and to um, really let your eye travel without much thinking. That's the I think the most important part for me is to let go of whatever it is that I'm preconceiving, whatever that sketch may be, to discovering something new, discovering that this contour has, certain movements that I wasn't expecting, or that there is negative space, right, that forms something else than what I initially saw. things like that. And so it I always feel like, artist's mind is never resting, because there's always something happening in front of you. But this time I was able to actualize something, which is a wonderful gift.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the lenses that everybody sees the world through.
Yeah.
So you're talking about how you're always kind of sketching in your mind. And I realized I'm frequently framing as if to take a photograph in my mind when I'm
Hmm.
looking at the world
Hmm.
and how I would document a certain shot
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
But then I was like, but how do other people frame the world if they're
Yeah.
not interested in that visual
Yeah.
dialogue that we're noticing? And I thought, well, some people are focused on capitalist gain. And so they're always evaluating for the monetary value of something.
Hmm.
And perhaps some people are um, in a moral framework and they're always evaluating, is this sin?
Yeah.
And so just that awareness of we're all doing this kind of framing
Hmm.
or this looking at the world.
Hmm.
And the more awareness we have of which frame we're inhabiting
Yes. Yes.
and applying
Yes. Yes.
gives
And
greater insight, right? Because I'm like,
yeah.
I want to be looking more at how I would draw it, not just how I would frame it.
Right.
But I
Right.
wouldn't have thought, oh, I can make that switch unless we'd been having this conversation. So thank you,
Well,
teacher.
absolutely. This is exactly why we have this conversation, right? We draw each other into this reality with capital R rather than, let's say, a you know defined categorical reality,
Hmm.
which is what you're talking about. Many times we define ourselves in a certain way, and we see the world through that lens.
Hmm.
But what art does is actually it forces us out of that
Hmm.
into a realm that we don't have control over, you know, um, and we are not certain of what will happen
Hmm.
any given moment. And artists are these strange creatures that have trained themselves actually to go beyond what is normative, or what is expected, or what is conventional. So it occurs to me, I just had this amazing conversation with Christian Wyman at Yale. They hosted me for my book coming out there, and as we were talking, Christian asked me a very simple, straightforward question, which is, I talk about imagination. I talk about sanctified imagination in my books. And he asked me, what do you suppose that is? And I thought for a minute, and I had to say that, we cannot see the world without imagination, right? I
Hmm.
mean, that's the surprising thing about imagination, is that people think, well, imagination is like fantasy. It's kind of this extra stuff that happens, with creative people. No, it's actually that our senses do not make sense until our imagination allows formation of, certain reality. And it could be those categorical things that we have expertise over. But what art does is to make us see not with the eye, but through the eye, as William Blake put it. It's through this integrated, intuitive reality that captures something bigger
Hmm.
than what we know to be certain.
Hmm.
And so, sanctified imagination, I think, is what artists are trying to tap into. And yeah, we are the first to struggle with it, because we we are so immersed in the sensual reality of our senses, right? So we are the first to be captured by singing a song or being in a play or whatever that may be, and yet those works of art that endure tend to have this sense of integration that go beyond that. That is a deeper knowledge, in fact, that we are able to harness and communicate that this larger realm to hopefully our audience, right? So, so this reality of people typically having certain ways of being able to deal with the world or to control the world that
Mm,
is in front of us, um, to capture something or to gain something out of it. As long as it's transactional only, it doesn't communicate more than that. You know what I mean? So you might be very successful and you might, be good at business and whatnot, but you will only get what you pour into it transactionally. So you if you're good at transaction, that you can make a lot of money, but it doesn't give you meaning. You know,
mm,
In fact, the more successful you are at that, the more you find yourself wondering, does any of this have any kind of human value
mm,
and deeper meaning?
mhm,
Whereas artists who are often not transactional, they're doing things out of love, let's say for theater. I know a lot of actors who would do Shakespeare for nothing, or modern dancers who pay their own way to rehearse so that they can dance on the stage. Those type of people are doing it for meaning,
mm,
the right, that's the sole reason. And they don't think about the transactional side. Maybe they should, just to make it more, enduring. But it's not. That's not what they're interested in.
mhm,
So I've noticed, Julia, as I've been talking to artists and traveling and doing all these things, that the world increasingly, right, is in need of artists who bring meaning into everything that we do, even like plumbing, even the practical things that we need to have done. How can we do that, in a way, which is something, what culture care, movement has been trying to help people understand.
yes. And in your latest book, Art
Yeah.
Is, as you were talking, I was thinking about what you wrote on page 149. We are defined by what we create in love,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the crux of what you've just
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's what defines us. But I was also reminded of Ruha Benjamin's book, Imagination and Manifesto.
Mm,
And she's a professor at Princeton.
okay.
And she's talking about the imaginaries that we all inhabit and the frameworks of
Mhm.
understanding that we inhabit, and how we can work towards greater or different imaginaries. And I think that
Yeah.
culture care is an imaginary, it
Yeah.
is a paradigm, it is a framework that we can inhabit and see in all facets of life.
Hmm. Absolutely. And, when we live in the world that is culture has become culture wars, um, and people assume that's the only way that we can move forward. But, culture war is in a sense, any war is lack of imagination, right? To say that, well, we're living in a limited resource environment and I have to win over you or invade your territory to gain something for my own purposes, security or whatever. But it is dealing with failures of imagination to see the other, first of all, as valuable lives at stake, and also culture that that will be decimated by you forcing yourself upon them, assuming that you have reason to do so. And but that's surely, there's something very much at the heart of that enmity that we have, what the Bible calls sin, right? Cain and Abel, right? This is the first example of this. But that violates what human beings are created for, which is to live into imagination, not of enmity, but of love. And so art has to, in a sense, well, it cannot exist, in the embeddedness of enmity, because that doesn't produce anything beautiful, But so artists are all trying to do their works of love in some way. And so to me, culture care resides, as you know, on the side of humanity, that allows imagination to grow. But I'm increasingly thinking that, in order for humans moving forward to create the future, right? That has to reside on this works of love. That
Yes.
in some ways, like, artists are given this, improbable task of not only creating something, and then, capturing reality as a prophetic statement, creating something beautiful, to bring transcendence into the world, but also to project into the future.
Mhm.
Something that is profoundly, well, it would be an antidote, certainly, to this rhetoric of wars and violence, and, just grabbing with power,
Mhm.
what continues to be the so-called only way that we have, to certainly to govern the world.
Yeah. Only way is an imaginary.
Yes, that's right. It's an
Yeah.
imaginary construct.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And so we are defaulting into. So I always say, if you're not sanctifying your imagination and working to grow your imagination, you're only consuming, right? You're taking in somebody else's fantasy, right? And then delimiting yourself, in that world, are often driven by fear and anxiety. So it only gets worse once you dive into that. So artist's task is to construct and deconstruct, and create new ways that, we can see the world, and new stories, right? That would resonate with our, stricken hearts, that we need, we need a better story that allows us to be more human, and more kind, and, more loving, and that's like, it's not a given anymore. I don't think, you can't just, rely on the past, and so artists have this huge responsibility moving ahead.
Yeah. More love.
Yeah,
More love, more kindness, more grace.
yeah, I
And
love.
so how does that show up in your work,
Oh
in your
my,
paintings?
that's a good question. I think certainly being faithful, like, I have to be able to continue doing what I do consistently and faithfully, and and it has writing this book has given me more opportunities to talk about these things, and having these show opportunities are fantastic. But, I really, tell younger artists, as I was, helping students, I kept on saying, well, what is your first love? You
Mm,
know, why paint? And that can be applied to anything, right? Why dance? Why write? And because it has to draw us back to that first impulse, when we first remember ourselves drawing something, and whatever that is kind of came alive, or, spoke to us, and we felt something go through us, or, whatever that may be. And I think our world has darkened so much that we began to lose that sense of magic,
mm,
and wonderment. Um, and we struggle every day to have hope, right, in the future. But that's precisely, I was just thinking over and over. I've written this, I've written on this, but, how could Frangelico paint those weighty, beautiful images, surrounded by Black Plague and invasions and uncertainties, and, popes being excommunicated, and all. I mean, it was not a cozy time when these artists did what they did. Shakespeare, right, writing, creating a theater around stricken London, that's just full of darkness and this sense of anxiety for the future. Hemingway, coming back from front lines, and or, as a journalist, and writing these novels that, still speaks to us. These people have done this before, you know,
yes.
stood in darkness and despair and hopelessness, and just sheer lack of hope. Um, and yet they did what they did. They were faithful. And I have to be, you have to be, we all have to do our part. And so, all that to say, I am more convinced than ever that artists are going to be necessary for future conversations. We are the ones who will come up with terms and expressions and words and stories and images that would draw people out of the current malaise, and it may not happen in our lifetime. We have to, going back to what we started with, it may be something that we deposit into culture, that years later people will find it, as a portal into something new. But nevertheless, we have to do our work.
Yes. Here's to more work.
It's the more work. Yes. Looking forward to it.
So
To see
good.
your work.
Thank you for this conversation, Mako.
Absolutely. And we look forward to seeing people's work.
Yes.
So please
Yes.
send us what you're thinking about, what you're doing, what you're wrestling with, and culture care communities, for
What
that
email
reason.
should they send it to?
Oh, hello@makotofujimura.com, or any of the links that we have in social media. We'd love to hear from anybody, responding. So,
Very good. Thank you so much.
okay, Julia, good to see you.
Happy Thanksgiving.